Welcome back to HFO Multifamily Market Watch, your trusted source for information for apartment owners and investors. Multifamily Market Watch is presented by Pacific Exteriors Northwest, a contractor specializing in siding and exterior envelopes and delivering exceptional quality and service for over 30 years. And by Gantry Incorporated, the nation's largest independent mortgage banking firm.
Hi, I'm Greg Frick, partner at HFO Investment Real Estate. Welcome back to Multifamily Market Watch. Today we have with us Tom Rinehart of Rinehart Strategies. Tom, thanks for joining us. I've kind of crossed paths with you back from Oregon Smart Growth, and now you're the new executive director of Oregon Smart Growth. So for people that don't know what that is, maybe give some background on how you got involved with the organization, and then we'll talk about kind of what the organization's doing moving forward as we come into the end of 25 and into 26.
Great.
So, yeah.
Sounds great. Thanks, Greg. And first, thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's great to be here.
Yeah.
Oregon Smart Growth is a trade association of civic-minded developers, architects, construction company executives, land use attorneys. And they were organized in 2017 as a response to market conditions around inclusionary housing and some policies that were developed at that time. I got active in the organization after leaving the public sector in 2022.
Okay.
And so by 2023, was asked to become the part-time contracted executive director by their executive committee, and have been working in that capacity since.
And really, again, I mean, when we started doing stuff with Oregon Smart Growth, it was back in, I think it was 16, 17.
Yeah.
As we had rent control coming in, and then there was inclusionary, changing from the multi-program to the inclusionary zoning. So it was started really local developers here within the metropolitan area.
Correct.
Has it expanded out to other parts of the state? Or
We do have a state legislative agenda, and we work with partners on that.
Okay.
We are actively talking to people in Central Oregon who are interested in the organization. And there has been some discussion about going across the river and working in Vancouver for obvious reasons on the development out there. We haven't engaged that as deeply because that provides some complexity around two different states in terms of policies.
Right.
But we will go with wherever people want to do the policy work.
And then, as you talked about, Vancouver or even Washington, that side didn't have some of the development challenges that we saw within the metropolitan, and Portland, in particular, with Multnomah County, Washington, and Clackamas, with inclusionary and things like that. Have you had to describe what's the kind of the mission and role of Oregon Smart Growth within the state and the kind of the development landscape?
Mission of the organization is to be an active voice in promoting dense, walkable, livable communities. So think of it as multifamily developers who are interested in larger developments and everything that goes with that: transportation infrastructure, the adequate economic activity to support investments at that scale, which I'm sure people that you've had on the show have talked about. So think of it as the folks that are agnostic on the urban growth boundary expansion debate, which we're having in this state, and more interested in how do we build up in the cities and how do we produce a policy environment that's conducive for that.
So really looking at how to increase density, how to get some volume in terms of the development side within whatever geographical area we're talking about.
That's right.
Yeah.
Join the HFO community and get weekly multifamily intel. Click to subscribe.
The governor came out, 36 some odd units was the goal.
36,000.
36,000, which again, we've never really hit that number. We're not going to hit that. What do you see as the root causes of the underproduction of housing, statewide as well as within the metropolitan area?
Glad you asked about the governor's goal. So I think we're trending at about 11,500 this year. So, roughly a third of that.
Now, I will give her some benefit that between interest rates and some other things.
The macro environment's been difficult, as
but
I think you would say.
But still, that was a lofty goal.
Right. And I, on behalf of the organization, want to recognize that we support that challenge. And we have said to the governor, we should try to do everything we can to meet that challenge. I'm glad you raised that because I want to talk about the governor and the mayor in the context of this answer. We actually asked the governor to put together a work group, which you might have seen covered in the media recently, saying how do we actually accelerate production. So we're grateful that she called together several members of Oregon Smart Growth from our board, and then other partners as well from the.
So you did have some representation.
We have
some
people that were 5 leaders there, plus myself as a
Okay.
staff support. And what we learned there was, I think, instructive around kind of one of the first points I made, and that we have a larger economic picture that's hindering us in this state. So just a couple of data points that came up in that group. in order just to meet the city of Portland's market rate goals for development, which is about 1,260 units per year, every year between this year and 2045.
Okay.
If you lay that out on a timeline and you give their number of roughly 430,000 a unit, again, their numbers, so not numbers that we generated.
Right.
You're looking at $535 million a year in outside capital that has to be brought just to the city of Portland.
That's just within the city of Portland.
Just to meet those goals.
Okay.
Which is roughly the equivalent of 6 buildings at 210 units.
Okay.
We obviously don't have 6 cranes in the air right now for 210 unit buildings.
No.
So what we tried to do in that group was to talk about the public sector can play a key role in that. Again, you probably have people on the show, but I'll say the same thing, but I'll repeat it, right? We need to be able to convince institutional investors, insurance companies, pension funds, others
to come back.
This is a good place to come.
Right.
That means we have adequate public safety supports, we have a good social service system, and we also have a place that wants their capital deployed. So that means permitting timelines are consistent. That means fees are competitive with other peer regions. And we try to impress that point. And we did get an excellent reception to some of these points. And we want to give the mayor and the governor credit for the system development charge waiver for 3 years, which is a big deal. That was one of our proposals.
It's something.
And it makes a significant difference on some pro formas, not all.
Right.
So in the answer to that question, we're seeing the landscape shift a little bit around folks really starting to understand the macroeconomic picture differently. My own personal opinion on this, and I think it's shared by most people in Oregon Smart Growth, is that between 2000 and 2019, it was less important for policymakers to understand that.
Oh,
we had people moving here. We had job growth. And now we're in a period that we're more focused on that than we thought we'd be. We thought we'd be more focused on kind of internal policies in places, and we are, but we're also focused on, listen, the big picture is we have to bring investment back.
Right.
So I hope that answers some of your questions. I'm happy to get into more detail on city policies.
So, and then, like you said, that was the governor's. And then when you go to the city, which a lot on the development side, people will say, you can have a mandate from the federal government, the state, but a lot of it's in the land use with the local municipalities. What was the reception within the city in terms of some of these challenges?
We had built some good initial relationships on the recalibration to inclusionary housing. So for listeners that don't know about this, we were active with some of our members on that committee with some tweaks. So the extension of the 10-year tax abatement, full building outside of the central city.
Right.
We think that's important.
Yes.
We think the reconfiguration ability that now developers have to move around where the rooms are, and that helps. Right? It doesn't satisfy everyone's concerns about inclusionary housing, but the policy's there, the goals are laudable, and we're trying to make it work.
Doing some tweaks.
We're doing some tweaking on it. We believe that we should do a similar process now with rental regulations. So the rental regulations through the FAIR ordinance and others that went in place 2017, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Oh, yeah, we've talked about it multiple times on this show.
We believe that there should be a public formal process just the same way it was done with inclusionary housing. We would like to have leaders from Oregon Smart Growth involved in that.
Okay.
And we think that there are ways to hopefully tweak that to make it more advantageous to build more housing. We want rental protections in place, and we want to juice housing production. So we're encouraging that at the city and having conversations about that. And there is some open mind to that.
There is. That's good.
There is some open mind. We also believe that, again, the interconnection that I mentioned earlier around, we have to have a safe environment for residents and businesses. We have to have some answers to the mental health crisis, and we have to be able to project that in terms of the brand repair. And so I would not have guessed we'd be as active in that with partners. I thought we would be more, when I took this role, more focused just on pure housing policy, but we've pushed into that because if we don't do that, it's going to be very hard to build housing.
You're not going to be able to attract capital. I mean, as you brought up, that's a big number of outside capital. That capital doesn't exist within the state, within the region, to get those kind of development lofty goals. And how do you change that narrative to bring capital in?
That's right.
One thing I always found interesting in dealing with some policymakers is the disconnect I've noticed, and it's good I think you brought that up with fair access, is the disconnect between some of the benefits, SDC, waiving things like that. There's stuff that works for single family, but as I've said to them, if you're doing a pro forma on a multifamily building, the operational costs, once you build it and have it up, affect are you going to come here or not? And I think I'm hoping that there's some reception to maybe looking at that it's just not about getting it up, because once it's up, we still have to operate, and if it doesn't make sense, you're still not going to come here and invest.
Right. Well, one avenue that might be interesting for people listening to this to hear about is we've also developed through Oregon Smart Growth a Development 101 slide deck. And what we are trying to do in sessions with city council members and their staffs, and hopefully other policymakers, is to show everyone's got a role here.
Right.
But the roles are poorly understood a lot of times. I'm sure I'm not the first person on the show to say it's not well understood the role of the developer as the sponsor of a project. It's
Not
just
at all.
one piece
Right.
of the picture.
Right.
You know, the bag that you put down isn't carrying $180 million on the $220 million building that you got to go find. So we tried to map out, and it was a very fiercely debated and interesting project for our group to figure out what are 10 slides that are understandable and that help people who are not in this world understandably to start getting, okay, well, the public sector's role is important. Private sector's role is important. We all have pieces to play. But how does this really work? And how does outside capital come in? And I think we are hopeful that it is making some headway in terms of everyone has to come to the table to solve this problem. We're not going to meet 36,000 units statewide unless we do.
And it's interesting because I was saying to somebody, it feels like we're getting more traction in Salem, the capital, as opposed to it's going to be, I think, tougher in the city but that's, where predominantly the development will happen.
Right.
But it's almost like there's more of a recognition now with legislators in Salem, like we all have to be involved in this. Hopefully that helps sway a little bit of, what's going on with the city within the county and the city government. Hopefully you guys sense some of that benefit as well.
I do, and I think I speak on behalf of the board and the policy committee of the organization, that people that are active in Salem. There is a recognition that things need to change. One of the pieces of legislation we will be supporting in the next session is an effort to say if inclusionary housing is mandated, every city that does do that in the state should have a specified sequence of reviewing the policy and seeing if it's working.
Right.
So like we did in Portland, to mirror that and to actually say, you can't re-up your mandate
Without a review
without
process.
a full review. Because what we're seeing is there is dissatisfaction in both the public and private sector and how it's working in some places. So we should make it better. We should adjust it. And we've gotten some open ears on that so far among legislators thinking about that for next session. So I do think it makes a difference to have policy work and action going in both places. They do inform each other.
Right.
It is a competitive environment in a healthy way. I mean, they want to keep up with each other.
Right.
So that's what we're trying to do.
Right. And again, I think that, as you brought up, it's competitive now between cities.
Right.
Even not within the state, but now,
Right.
I think, I don't want to say we got a little big-headed in terms of our own success, but forgot that we are competing now with where capital is going to go, and we have to compete with these other cities in the West Coast and even further to the east. And if we don't do that, it's not going to come here.
Right.
So we've got to be more open to looking at changes, tweaking things when they need to be tweaked. So what are some of the bigger, kind of roadmaps or goals you guys are looking for in 26 from a legislative side, or kind of where are you pinning your success on for next year?
Yeah, in 2026, we're really going to be focused at this point on the inclusionary housing piece that I just mentioned.
Okay.
I think that'll be a major focus. We do think that there's going to have to be some work outside of the legislative process to help this Housing Production Accountability Office work.
Yeah.
And we're committed to that. And we've said that to the governor and her team. It's unclear exactly what role Oregon Smart Growth will play, but we want to do that. We also, in building on what I said about the governor and mayor's work group, we are committed to helping bring investors to town through our networks when that time is right.
Okay.
Around policy changes, economic action planning, work that what maybe a Prudential or a MetLife or a pension fund fiduciary, somebody would want to come see, oh, it's changing in Oregon, and I might want to come back here and give this place a shot. So that's one of the things we are very interested in 2026 in doing.
To try to get that message out.
Correct.
That you're trying to do. If you could say there's one thing on the development climate tomorrow that you could change, what would it be?
Yeah, I appreciated this question and,
Yeah.
and the list you sent out and jumped on it. I think time and time again in different words, what comes out of folks, and not just developers, but construction company execs and architects and attorneys in this space, is there is a tremendous amount of expertise housed, many others in this space here. It's not often trusted and called upon.
Right.
And there's a sense of frustration that with all the housing emergency language and the sense that the Oregon's economy is dependent upon building a significant amount of housing with the numbers we've mentioned, Recent presentations by our most prominent economists have continued to underscore this.
Yes.
Unless we build housing, it's going to be very hard with the immigration that we depend on to grow this state. So there is a sense of frustration, which then hopefully we can push towards hope that that spirit of partnership will grow. That the public sector, as talented as it is, needs people who understand how to build large multifamily buildings and the complexity of development and attracting capital. And we are hopeful and would say that that's the most significant thing that needs to change, that true partnership around people should be depending on the experts to help solve this problem.
And again, you don't just, as in your job of, as a consultant, do you think that's unique to this, or is it more unique to this industry? Because it's hard, because, I've been in the industry for a long time. Sometimes you got to step out, is it like just a natural distrust on the development side? It's just weird because the same thing we have, for as small of a city that we are, the amount of expertise that we have here. Because again, we were on the map, but then a lot of people don't lean towards it to try to tap that resource. It's just weird. I always wonder, is it like that in a lot of other industries? Yeah,
it's a great question. So my own personal opinion is this is connected with the roots question that you sent out. What are the roots of this problem? The roots, I think, and as someone that grew up in Spokane, which has a different political climate in many ways and a social climate, there's a fundamental distrust in Pacific Northwest in many ways to any type of formal institution. So be it government, and I think large-scale development capital providers, it's another layer in the Portland area in particular. This is all connected to Oregonians' deep ambivalence about growth, which again has been underscored in several presentations recently, which we have talked about at length in Oregon Smart Growth. We actually do have to grow to support all the social services, schools, public budgets. And the more that we can talk about that, I think the better off we are. But there is suspicion of that. And it comes from, it's uncomfortable. And I've talked to my neighbors about, we do need four-story buildings on Martin Luther King. That's where we need to build them. Mm-hmm. It comes from fear of traffic or farmlands being eaten up. And the kind of things we love about Oregon, people view at risk.
With any kind of growth.
We think we can do
density.
both. We think we can do both. We can do it in the dense urban environment and preserve what Oregonians love about this state. But the ambivalence is there, and policymakers are justifiably shy from getting into some of these debates. And we're trying to help with that. Right. And so some of the stats and some of the work that I mentioned earlier, we're trying to figure out how do we do both, and how do we attract capital and build things that kind of fit in with Oregon's values.
Well, my hope is with you guys advocating like you are, that message is getting through. I do get a sense that it's going to sound kind of that there's a younger generation that maybe is not so steeped in the Tom McCall anti-growth, and then kind of looking and as people go to other cities and see. So my hope is that we do get some movement. I know you guys have done a great job. You've made a lot of inroads in places, halls of government that a lot of other groups couldn't get into because of, I think, some of that perception of the developers are this and that.
Right.
So, I commend you guys for that. And
Thank you.
Hopefully the work keeps going. And if people want to find out more about the organization, you can go to the website there on the bottom. And thank you again for taking the time to share with the audience. It was very enlightening.
Okay.
And we'll see you again next time on Multifamily Market Watch. Thank you.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information. HFO is a member of Global Real Estate Advisors. Learn more at grea.com.
Love the insights? Tap the like button and click subscribe. It helps us bring more multifamily news straight to you.